Welcome to the Northeast Kingdom Voice. I'm your host, Scott Wheeler. Today's guest is Bob Joly, the Executive Director of the Athenaeum in St. Johnsbury. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Scott. Good to be here. I really appreciate getting to be on your show. I'm an admirer, and as I said to you in an email, we have, and I'm going to show it, the first issue of it, Volume 1, Number 1 of Vermont's Northland Journal, when it was the Kingdom Historical. We have the whole run, so I'm honored to be here.
I appreciate it, and you're on here because you wanted to talk about a topic that is near and dear to my heart, and it sounds like to yours as well. You want to talk about Northeast Kingdom writers and how you're collecting, or your place of business is collecting everybody's books.
We're certainly trying to. It's called the Northeast Kingdom Authors Collection, and all libraries have the books of the people who they know well in their region, say famous people like Galway Cannell or Howard Frank Mosier, Reeve Lindbergh. We have those authors, we always have, but we're putting together a permanent collection so that we're buying multiple copies of the books by these authors, and we'll have this as a permanent collection. So if people wanted to come to a place in the kingdom and study who has published in this area, what have they published, we're trying to have a complete list of authors. And in most cases, we will buy all the books from those authors. In some cases, there are people who have written so many books, we might not acquire all of them. But it's going to be a place to come by and say, who has lived here? And even if they haven't written about the kingdom, they have a long association. They summered here for decades, or they grew up here, or they moved here decades ago. So that's what the collection is all about. And we're really looking for help, for information about authors in Essex and Orleans County in particular. We probably know more about Caledonia County. We know less about Orleans and Essex counties.
Yeah, and I know before the show started, I put you on to somebody. Well, actually, he doesn't know he wrote 2 books because he passed away a few years ago. Fred Cowan. Mm-hmm. Fred Cowan was a forester in Essex County, and he was very much of a writer as well, a writer and a storyteller. Mm-hmm. And his writings appeared in local papers, including over in, I believe it's maybe Colebrook, but throughout. So the Canaan Historical Society they've now combined all of them, and they're on their 2nd book of collections of the history of the woods, and just the woods and logging and everything of Essex County and beyond, and in a way that only Fred, who, he was just a great guy, member of the 10th Mountain Division during World War II. They're just great stories, and they're on, as I said, the Canaan Historical Society is now on book 2. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure if Fred can see those books, he's pretty darn proud.
And if those, as we were saying, if those stories aren't collected by somebody, and often it's a local historical society, the Orleans County Society put out that book decades ago of Daisy Dopp's Farm, illustrated by Peter Schumann and introduced by Elke Schumann. If those stories aren't gathered, they don't necessarily go on. They're in papers, but they're hard to find. And you lose some of the history of the people who grew up here. You could read about the different ways people lived their lives then. And we have got in our collection a number of local histories from towns in Caledonia County where people grew up here. They have fantastic memories of what life was like, how it's changed. In some cases, they wrote columns for local papers, and maybe they took the initiative to get them published into a book form. And we're definitely trying to collect those because it is a history that's It's harder to find once it's gone. And so much of what we're doing seems to be recorded electronically. If that gets transferred, great. If it doesn't, it's a lot harder to access.
And I think some of these obscure books, particularly the obscure ones written by the person who lived that chapter of whatever chapter of life, even if the person isn't this wonderful writer, but them capturing the story like they could only do. Like, I think sometimes, I hate to say it, I've been a writer for years, and I think sometimes writers have a habit, or reporters, of writing about the same people. As in, if I write about somebody else then writes about that same person. And what I tell people, I'll write about prominent people who have played a role in our history. But on the other hand, I tell people, some of the people who have some of the richest stories are ordinary people who have lived very ordinary lives, or ordinary for them. Like, how I often find, that if somebody jumps up and down and says they have a story to tell, they might, but a lot of times they don't. But it's the person that I go up to and they tell me, well, no, I don't really have a story to tell. And a lot of times I know I have somebody I want to interview. And a lot of times that's the way it all works. And so these obscure authors, or maybe authors people have forgotten about, or I don't want to call them one-hit wonders, but people who felt a passion to put their memories down, or a loved one's memories, those are really what intrigue me.
Yeah, they're fabulous because they're not reporting special events or well-known events. It's the life that was lived. And those people are bringing us details just about what went on for them. I'm going to dig out a book here just to show. This is something that through this project I got introduced to. It's Loudon Young's Off Main Street, West Glover, Vermont. And I didn't know Loudon Young because he was before I lived up here. These stories are hilarious. They're from the 70s and 80s. They were in the Newport Express, I think.
Well, he was affiliated strongly with the Chronicle, I'll tell you.
Yes. Yeah, this says weekly columns from the Chronicle, 74 to 77. And these are laugh out loud funny. And I didn't know this man. And the book is hard to find. Again, this is what it looks like. In case you bump into a copy, you should pick it up. I got this copy donated to our collection by Christine Hadsel, who's a board member here, who really was the founder of this project. I called his daughter, who's still at the Chronicle, and said, do you actually have a copy that we could get? She said, no, I don't even have a copy. So fortunately, these columns were gathered into a book. It's spiral bound. There aren't a lot of copies around. I'm sure individuals have them, and hopefully a few historical societies have them. But if this isn't around to read, to bump into accidentally, or to be brought out, I this summer read some stories from this book in a reading series we had here about this collection. They're hilarious. They're about the weather. They're about fishing. They're about the mail person, that kind of stuff. And it's just what was life like back then in this period, 71 to 74. They're really hilarious. And I never heard of this man. So I was missing out on this. Hopefully this project helps fewer people miss out on some of these great common stories that are out there.
I'll have to talk to you later about this. Is I often get emails from people who are clearing out their loved ones' belongings. And, a lot of times the love of history is not passed down. And I often get people contacting me who want someplace to donate old local books. And, a lot of people, well, I do have my local books that I use for reference, but for the most part, I'm a collector of stories, as in I interview people. But do you accept, like, if if you already have the history of, say, Irisburg, do you take more of that stuff?
It would depend on the condition, and do we in fact have a copy of the book? Because local town histories are great. We try to collect, if there is a history of a town in any one of these 3 counties, we try to collect those. And we put that in a reference collection rather than this NEK authors collection, because sometimes they're not specifically by one author, but they're important to have because often they don't come out in a big edition. They're not multiple thousands copies. There's maybe 1,000, maybe 500. So we certainly would be interested in hearing about them, because if we don't have it, we would take it. We catalog the things. We don't just bury them somewhere where you can't find them. If we take something in, we want it to be available to people to either check out or to read here. So we catalog them properly. You can find it online through our catalog, and then you can either check it out or come here and use it. So we're certainly interested in looking at local history materials.
You know, the one thing I like too is I think some of these smaller, lesser known writers, I think sometimes they capture things that nobody else can capture or will capture. Like, for example, when it comes to the Northeast Kingdom, I kind of joke about it. There's some people write about it like there's this quaint little, beautiful kingdom. But then other people write about it as this gnarly, hard place to live. But truth be told, we fall somewhere in between. And the thing is, for myself, I don't shy away from also writing about the gnarly. If I, like I've written about the cross burnings of the KKK during the 1920s and 30s. And some people say, well, why do you do that? Because that's a sad chapter. And I said, absolutely. But it still needs to be recorded.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can't leave out the stuff that just seems unpleasant, because it is. Otherwise, you get a colored history of what really happened in a place, and it's not a true history. So I completely agree. You can't leave out the stuff that seems unpleasant, and it is a hard place to live. It's a hard place to make a living. Like I said, I moved here from Iowa, and for a year before I moved here, I got a subscription to the Caledonian Record because I wanted to get familiar with the place, and I knew I was going to come to somewhere around here, Barnet, Peacham, Danville. I ended up in Peacham. And I actually read the paper and I said, God, what do people do up there? It's hard to make a living. There's no work. I had come from a University of Iowa. But I got familiar with the sort of the good and the bad of the place, because the paper covered the whole run of it. And it certainly familiarized me with how it's a harder place to live. There's a lot of people just, scratching out a living, several jobs, that kind of thing. And there are a lot of stories as a result of that. If you grew up here and you're dedicated to this region because it's your home place, you're very particular about it. I learned the difference between the town of St. Johnsbury and the town of Lyndonville. Not that I didn't understand the difference, but the great rivalry between the schools, the associations people have with one town versus the other, and you better know which side you're on if you live in one and you work for an institution in that town. So I got schooled in that fairly early on when I came here, and I thought, okay, these are very particularly partisan people to their own town, and it was good to learn that early.
So, have you had any surprising finds during this search?
Some authors who have published a single book. And what I do regularly is go down to Boxcar and Caboose here in St. Johnsbury, and they have that Railroad Press imprint. They will put a book together for you. And there are lots of people who have had, say, one novel. They always wanted to write the novel. They got it done. Maybe it's a history of just what they thought of growing up here. So there are people who really are saying, I've got this one thing I'm going to write and I'm going to publish it. And because of that ability at Boxcar and Caboose, you can get a beautiful printed copy or 10 copies or 100. So I've seen things there that are single authors. I went there a couple of years ago. There was a book of poetry by a girl who was a Danville high school student, written about her mother, and her mother had some serious drug addiction problems. And this was a project that she had been mentored through. She talks in the book about who helped her accomplish this. And it was both therapeutic. It was informative because, as far as I understand, she used her own name, and you would have known this family by her book. That was very informative. And there was, I think, 1 or 2 copies at Boxcar and Caboose. The imprint was from Danville. That's where she lived. So I bought a copy of that book. It's in our collection, and it's there to be discovered by somebody who just wonders, who is this person and why did she write this book? It's a book of poetry about her own tribulations in high school because of her mother's condition. So things like that were really informative. And I'm just going to show something else. We have a collection of Leland Kinsey's poetry and Natalie Kinsey Warnock's picture books and chapter books. And our collection of these books came from Natalie, and they were books that she and her brother gave to their parents. So each one is inscribed. This one says, "For Mom and Dad, with love, Natalie." So those are fun things, but what is in this book are little pieces of paper in scenes where I think Natalie's mother put a piece of paper. This is one right here, naming who this kid is and who this kid is and that kid. They're local people from around their farm. So her mother would take these books and say, oh yeah, those are nice illustrations, but that's actually, in this case, Tyler Rogers, Meredith McIlvaney, Megan Rogers. So her mother took her copy of Natalie's book and put notes in it about who are the kids who are illustrated in there. So in a few cases, some of these books have a personal association with the author because they're addressed to somebody else. Or in this case, it's a very special book just because her mother sat down and said, yeah, just so we remember who were all these kids, they're neighborhood kids, and she names them in this copy. And I know it's a unique copy in that regard. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's sounds like your project's going well, but what about your speakers series? How's that going?
Less well, I have to say. This sort of started in 2021, which was the 150th anniversary of the Athenaeum. So we'll also remember 2021, we were mid-COVID, so we weren't gathering. So we did a few filmed readings, that is, small groups of people gathered in the gallery. We filmed some readers. The kickoff year celebrated 6 authors who had read at the Athenaeum a lot: Galway Cannell, Howard Frank Mosier, Rachel Hoddes, Beth Cannell, Don Bredis, and Reeve Lindbergh. So we had they or other people reading their works. So it's been harder for us to have a reading series. Now that COVID seems to be successfully behind us, we're picking up speed again, and it's part of the reason I was really excited to be on your show and talk about both the collection, but the readings that we're going to have, and we're really hoping that you will read in this series and the choice of subject is yours. It could.
Yeah, I'll be, as I told you, most people, they will winter in Florida, come back to Vermont, while I still have my business in Vermont, but I spend most of my winter in a snowier climate in Marquette, Michigan.
Yeah.
And so I think I'm going to be there for most, but not all of April, because I need to be there for the one day I need to be there. I've written enough about it, is the eclipse.
Yes, it's a big deal this year.
Yeah, and I've written enough about the 32 eclipse. I can't possibly miss this one, because I don't know if I got several more decades in me.
That's right.
So I'll talk to you about a date, and I will tell you one, that no matter what, people just are still fascinated by prohibition.
Your book that we have in our collection is never here. It's always out. We've got.
Do you have my first one that's out of print, Rum Runners and Revenuers, Prohibition in Vermont? That was published through Green Mountain Books. And
oh, no, we don't have that one. I don't even know. Do you sell it?
No, I don't. You
Yep.
can find it on auction sites, though.
I'm going to write this down to make sure we get a copy of it.
So with it's hard to believe we're already down to about 10 minutes only. What more would you like to talk about?
The real help that we can get from anybody who sees this, if you live in Orleans or Essex counties and you know people who have written a book, if you go to the Athenaeum website, which is just www.stjathenaeum.org, or just Google St. Johnsbury Athenaeum. And the Athenaeum is a funny word, but if you're close, Google will drive you to our site. You can look on a tab on the website that says NEK authors. There's a list of 225 people. It's alphabetical, just by surname. If you look on there and you say, hey, this person I know, these 3 people I know, they're not on this list. If you can send us a note, an email, call us up, we really want to know who these people are. Number one, we're growing the list of people who live here. And whether or not they wrote exclusively about things in the kingdom, that's not the point as much as they lived here and they wrote books. We really want to know who they are. The next thing we'll do is we will search for books by them. We'll call local people. We'll call you if you give us information about somebody you know about to see if we can get a copy. We catalog the books. We keep them in a special collection. We don't loan them out. You can use them here. But it would be a great help to us to have people look at the list and say, you missed all these people. Because we're, like I say, we know a lot more about the people who are here in Caledonia County, and probably just more really well-known people in Essex and Orleans. But I'm sure we're missing people. So if people can supply names of people who wrote the books, even if you don't have the exact title of the book, we'll find the person, we'll find out about them, and then we'll try to get a copy of the book. That would be a huge help to us.
Yeah, I'm sitting here right now, and just as soon as you click off and disappear, I'm going to come up with probably half a dozen people
That's
that will
great.
suddenly come out of because I just gotta, once I think about it, and one thing I haven't gotten into, but other people love is is reading books on Kindle and that and I know but for my kind of reading or for my kind of writing, it just doesn't seem to cut it.
Yeah.
I tried an online version of the Northland Journal, and I just didn't have enough interest to make it worth it, because my kind of writing, people want to hold, they want to preserve.
And it's great to see the supporters, the people who buy ads in your publication, because they're helping keep it alive. And I know newsprint, it gets more and more expensive. So we are great subscribers here. We're going to keep subscribing, because it's a really invaluable record of what's going on here. I have learned so much about the kingdom, looking at every issue. We have an index to the first many years, and then on your site, you can just go there and you can see issue by issue what's in each one. So the index is kind of on your site.
I gotten kind of when my wife was sick and subsequent pass, and I got a little slack on recording every issue, which I need to get back to. But here's a secret about my work is, do you know every article that goes, I don't love every article that goes into it, even if I wrote it, because sometimes you have to, it's important. Just because you're not interested in something doesn't mean it's not valuable. And that's how, I have a host of people who regularly contribute to the journal, which gives it a different voice. And, whether it be, Sylvia Dodge down your way, she's a regular contributor. Beth Cannell has been. Then I have groups, I have people up here, but some of the most magical ones are people who write their own stories. So
Yeah, it's what makes the thing so interesting to read. Some of them are your stories. Some of them are just pieces by somebody else, and they're so personal that way. You really do get a sense of the person who lived there, who experienced that, whose family their own family they're writing about. And each issue, my father was a big race car fan. He used to drive little midget cars when he was a teenager, I think, even though he was a big dude. I love reading stories about racing just because I grew up with my father being such an enthusiast. So I will say I am very educated about things up here that, like you, sometimes I don't really care about it, but I read it because I want to know that little bit of history. And then there's always something that I can't wait to read.
Like, I love to regale people. When you get to be our age now, you get to talk about back when I was a kid. Well, back when I was a kid, we used to go to the Coventry landfill to watch race car driving.
Yep.
Because Charlie Netto had the Can-Am Speedway right where he operated his landfill. Mm-hmm. And now it's, some people call it Mount Casella. It's the state's only large fill. So when most people look at that mountain, they think of trash. Those of us, we look at it as a race car track. Mm-hmm, and those are such, I think some people, they when people say they don't have a story to tell, no, they do, but they're thinking big. Like, I sat down recently with a 102-year-old, and her memories, she said, I don't have much to tell. But then it was so, yes, she did. She didn't have this big story to tell. She lived almost her entire life within like 50 yards of where she was born.
Wow.
But she had, very interesting stories to tell. Mm-hmm. So, okay, well, we only have about another 2 minutes. If people want to contact you for any of these topics, how do they contact you?
An easy way is to go to our website if you have connectivity, or go to your local library. They can get you onto the St. Johnsbury Athenaeum website. There's a part at the top in a green banner that says NEK authors. There's a one-page list of 225 authors. That'll tell you who we already know about. There's more information about this whole project, the collection and the reading series. You can also just call the Athenaeum. It's 802-748-8291 and ask for me, Bob Joly, and say, I want to talk about NEK authors or an author or something like that. Or you can write to us. The address is on the website, but it's 1171 Main Street, St. Johnsbury, 05819. And Scott, thank you so much for letting me come on the show. I really, really feel privileged to be talking to you and to be on this show. I was watching the issue with Peggy Pearl just a little while ago.
Yeah.
It was really fun.
Hey, I can't help but ask you this. Since we've talked about authors and such, have you ever written a book?
No. I am a librarian. I'm a collector of books. I'm not a writer. When I finally retire, I think, like you said, everybody has a few stories to tell. I probably do. But right now, I do this work. I'm a book conservator, so I bind and repair books on the side. I fill my time with these two things, and that's about it for now.
If you're a book conservator, you must have enjoyed talking to David Cannell.
Oh, yes. Yeah, they had a fabulous bookshop and a great collection of things. And he and Beth are wise people. And rest in peace, David. And you mentioned Beth Cannell writing for the the Northland Journal. She's fantastic. I read her columns wherever they appear. We have all of her books. They're set in Danville. They're set very regionally. They're set in the mid-19th century. It's a fascinating historical look at this place in that time. She's really, and she's a fabulous speaker. If anybody wants to have her, do that.
She's an outstanding researcher too, because she does a great job. Okay, we've got to wrap this up, but hey, you've got to come back on sometime.
I would appreciate it, Scott,
because it's my favorite topic.
I know it is, and you were the first and only person I wanted to talk to about this project, and we will continue to have, and I'm going to show it one more time, That's the first issue of the
Dude, look
Northland
out.
Journal. We have every single one, and we'll always have this. So stop
All right,
by
hey,
and check it
I
out here.
appreciate your support because if people think I'm doing this to get rich, well, let me tell you, that doesn't happen. At least money wise, I am rich in far more ways than money.
Yes, yes.
So, okay, hey, thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks so much, Scott.
And thank you for the work you do. I look forward to hopefully speaking in April.
It would be great. We would love to have you. Thank you, everybody. Bye.
All right. Thank you. And thank you to the viewers for tuning in to another segment of the Northeast Kingdom Voice.